This is a DOD Fed Globe production, and we have with us today the Transgender Chairwoman for DOD Fed Globe, Sandeen. Hi, Autumn.
Hello.
And can you tell us a little bit about your background in the military?
Well, I am a 20-year U.S. Navy veteran. I served between 1980 and 2000. I served on 4 U.S. Navy ships, the Maliness Tisdale, the Gary, and the Ford. And the Gary I served in the Persian Gulf on, and all those 3 ships are FFGs, or fast frigates with guided missiles on them. And then the last ship was the USS Coronado, which was the 3rd Fleet Command ship. On the USS Coronado, I have a don't ask, don't tell story. I was sexually harassed because I was perceived to be gay. My after career after the US Navy, I was declared a disabled veteran. My current rating is 100%, and my employment after the VA after my time in the Navy includes a short 8-month stint at the VA working in the education department. Unfortunately, my disabilities got in the way of me being able to stick with that job. So currently, I'm 100% disabled veteran who doesn't work, except on boards and except on the blog Dan's House Plan.
And you have direct experience having been harassed because it was assumed that you were gay, even though you were not gay. You were transgender when you were in the military, and you survived that.
Yes, I was. In fact, this is still up. It used to be on the Service Members Legal Defense Network, but that piece still is up on the Human Rights Campaign's website. In fact, if you Google search for my name, Autumn Sandeen, it still shows up on there. I was harassed because I was effeminate, or perceived to be effeminate, and effeminacy is presumed to be you're gay. And the thing is, I have never been with a male in my entire life, ever. So it was kind of that really, really strange thing of being perceived as gay without actually being gay.
And so now you're a member of the DOD Fed Globe. In fact, you're one of the original founder members. Could you talk a little bit about our board?
Well, we have a board of several chairs, and they cover all sorts of issues that are specific to working as a lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender veteran. Or not veteran, excuse me, as a Department of Defense employee. And in my case, I'm the Transgender Chair. And this is about, well, I can tell you from being, even working at the Veterans Administration, there are not a lot of transgender people working in government service. However, there are a number working in there. And because especially transgender women are perceived to be gay men, they're treated with the same kind of deference that a visibly gay, an effeminate gay man or a masculine lesbian is treated at. They're basically assumed to be, being the most visible, they're also the most visibly harassed. So this is the case throughout the board in society. It applies equally as well to the Department of Defense. One of the things when the Obama administration came in is their OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, announced that they were renewing the letter that President Clinton put in that said you can't discriminate based on sexual orientation. But he also added to that gender identity and expression. So with gender identity being added to the protected classes, basically, by presidential decree, it basically means that transgender people, along with gays, lesbians, and bisexuals, are not supposed to be discriminated against. Unfortunately, the regulations that are supposed to be in place to support these, or will eventually be in place, have not been gone through. They're currently still being written, and once they're written, then there's a public comment period, and then they're allowed to become, regulation that is on the books. In the meantime, the transgender employees are quasi-protected in that they are not supposed to be discriminated against, but in the real world, they are discriminated against. And if you look at statistics coming from, and again, this is not Department of Defense specific, but just generally how transgender people are treated at work, both the Transgender Law Center and the task force came up with similar numbers, and it's roughly 85-86% of transgender people are discriminated against in the workplace. However, only 12% of them will actually, well, let me rephrase it, discriminated or harassed, or in some way the workplace has made a difficult place for them to work, which is that 85-86% number, but only 12% actually report the harassment or discrimination that they face, which speaks to the internalized transphobia of my community, or my sub-community of the broader lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. So my job is to kind of be that voice, that conscience in the room that talks about transgender issues. And one of the other things I am always advocating for is diversity, all sorts of diversity. We need to have transgender people in the room for sure, and we need the entire lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community represented in any board or any organization that I work in. And plus it has to be, for me, racially diverse, socioeconomically diverse, that we don't look for people who are, just of a specific class, the money-giving class, and the specifically not the normal people that you would see. So such as on our board, we have 2 other trans people on board. One of them is my friend from a long time back, Jamie Novak, and another on the board is Vicky Estrada. And of course, Vicky Estrada represents not only being trans, she also represents being Hispanic. She's a Latina woman. And in my case, I represent not only being a transgender person, but I also represent being a disabled person and being a veteran and somebody who's, well, I mean, those are the intersections I deal with, as being a disabled and veteran and female and, transgender. So we have a broad spectrum that we're trying to cover, but it's also not, and usually, and just to add one more thing there, usually most of the members, usually cross at least two minority populations or protected classes if they're protected under law. So we do have a diverse board. We do have a, both age, both gender, both or representing the entire spectrum of LGBT or lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community, racial diversity, experience diversity, all kinds of things.
Now, last year was our first My Patriots Pride, and you were one of our star speakers. Can you talk a little bit about My Patriots Pride and why people need to do this all over the nation on November 11th?
Well, My Patriots Pride is a very, very important event in the sense that it's a lot of veterans that were impacted, a lot of them by Don't Ask, Don't Tell, a lot of them that just never got to serve openly as who they are, and of course allies and supportive members, supportive people and supportive service members. In my case, in telling my story, mine is kind of, I don't want to say unique, but it definitely is not the norm, where I was perceived to be gay, but I wasn't gay, but Don't Ask, Don't Tell rules applied because I was transgender and hiding it. So they couldn't ask me my sexuality because the Don't Ask, Don't Tell rules were in. So they asked me, is there anything you want to tell us? Which is basically trying to get around the rules that they weren't supposed to ask. And this is what we find in a lot of cases, that oftentimes they violate their own rules in finding out how an active duty service member is lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. And even though repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell will only impact directly lesbian, gay, and bisexual service members, honestly, it's a stepping stone for my community. We need to get this step out of the way, then we need to deal with the transgender veterans, and then we need to deal with, even backing up further than just dealing with the military, dealing with the American Psychological Association, which creates the diagnostic...
MMPI.
Yeah, MMPI is, I think, the European one. The BSM, and I'm drawing a blank on what the S stands for. It's Diagnostic Something Manual. But anyway, it's if you have something that's considered a mental health issue, it usually falls in this manual. And currently, gender identity disorder is listed. And under DSM-4, there's no out. I mean, once you have it, you always have it. And in DSM-5, they try and address that. But honestly, a lot of folk in our community think that it should be reformed. And even though there should be mental health components to it, that it shouldn't be a mental health disorder or mentioned at all in the DSM in that way. And this does make it so, and even the APA agrees, the American Psychiatric Association, this should not be a reason that folk are discriminated against, but as long as we're listed in the DSM, it's going to be awfully hard to give trans people to be able to serve openly in the military, whether they're post-surgical, non-surgical on genitalia or not. It's just, so that's going on to the side. That's a long-term goal to deal with this and all the ways that we can appropriately deal with it, but in the short term, we need to get it so at least the lesbian, gay, and bisexual portion of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community are able to serve openly and honestly as who they are.
Now, federal workers in the Department of Defense that are transgender, that are not military, they're not supposed to be discriminated against, and they are supposed to be covered by Title VII, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's complaint process if they're discriminated against. However, it has been my finding that most EEO counselors in the federal government are completely clueless about transgender being protected based on sex stereotyping.
Right, this is the interesting thing, because in lots of court cases where they've tried to argue, where transgender is a protected class because, it should be protected under the equal, basically an equal protection thing, which would be the 14th Amendment clause, that has not really worked in the courts. However, going on chapter, 7?
Title VII.
Title VII claims transgender people have been more successful. In that case, they argue the Price v. Waterhouse argument that expected gender norms are what is being discriminated against. So if you are male-bodied and you are going through the transsexual experience, then a lot of folk are being fired, not because they're actually, they're being fired for being transgender, but that's actually not allowed under Title VII because gender norms are not supposed to be enforced in that way. In other words, if you don't conform to gender stereotypes, you're not supposed to be discriminated against. So they often look for other reasons, or they often state it that it's, they try and get around it by saying we fired them not for not conforming to gender norms, but because they're transsexual. Well, yeah, transsexual is not a protected class, but arguing the other way, that gender is, and that transgender is a form of, well, it's a protected class, again, under Title VII, by not conforming to expected norms of your biological sex.
And if somebody wants to ask questions of you, they could contact you through the DOD Fed Globe website, and you look forward to hearing from them.
That's correct, especially transgender folk, because again, I'm the transgender